Connect to build this project. Friktion is so amazing. So like what led you guys to building Friktion, and can you tell us more what Friktion is?
Yeah, for sure. I guess what led us here. Okay, so well, we were all kind of like I would say just like normal active power DeFi users from front end and back end, and we were just like, there's a lot of things that we're missing on Ethereum DeFi, particularly in the risk management space. So the same institutional portfolio management tools that we would have just didn't exist. In the sense of like, okay, I have a bunch of assets in my wallet that can be like spot, futures, perps, options, and then yield farms. They classify yield farms in like subcategories and stuff too. So first thing was like, hey, there's no way to do this, and we were like doing these like crappy manual tracking of tools, and like anyone who used Ethereum farming probably used VFAT at some point, and all sorts of these tools, trying to like amalgamate them to have a really good set of like more active trading tools. And then we kind of started to realize like, hey, the big thing that we needed was some sort of hedging product that covered like stable and stable LP token exposure. So then we like, how this all started was actually just me and Alex were talking about like how to hedge IL in probably like July in like a non-perp based way. And that had like some decently like options driven components to it. So that's what we got excited about. And then the more we thought about it, we're like, okay, that's kind of a complex derivative to get to. We have to start with some simpler products that people can include as part of an everyday portfolio that you may see in like an equities or bond based offering. So things that like normal kind of boomers are used to having in their portfolio. So then the idea kind of came along that we have to build a portfolio management solution so people can have products to own and sit inside, kind of set and forget across market cycles. And that consists of kind of everything on the risk reward spectrum. So focused on volatility as the asset class, given that's kind of what we were comfortable with. And Alex had done a lot of work in that at university from like a research and trading side too. So
yeah, that's super cool. And actually something we were looking at in the early days as well was like, how can we use options for permanent loss hedging? But it is, I think, quite a complicated payoff function. And it's definitely good. I think you guys are starting simpler. Like there are still so many kind of, I think more fundamental structured products to kind of build out before we get to that stage. But yeah, like that whole timeline is very exciting.
Yeah, I think we view it as like kind of really interesting to kind of find like some traction in a certain area, right? Like typically when you're kind of building a product, like find your like a PMF to begin with, and then from there kind of expand out there. So we kind of view like we have this TradFi background, portfolio management background, like isn't really thought about, considered in crypto space very often in DeFi, where it really should be, right? It's kind of like it's there's a lot of analogies to like the TradFi world. So I mean, I think we've kind of bring that like mindset in, and our long-term vision is kind of outside of single structured products and more into like merging products into like some kind of cohesive portfolio that makes sense for like a given user. So I think that's kind of Friktion.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think there's going to be a lot of experimentation on like both our ends and trying to find like what the ideal product market fit is, like what kind of product really resonates with the kind of crowd that comes to crypto.
Yeah, I think
moving on to the
it's
next.
going to be really
weird.
No,
go ahead.
It's going to be really weird, right? Because like we don't have like 10 million active DeFi users right now. So like, what does product market fit even mean for DeFi? It's like can mean a ton of things, but it's definitely going to be different in like T+1 year type thing, and it's only going to change every year. So yeah, it's kind of crazy to try to like build with that in mind. I feel like the solution is just to build something that can be super composable. Like that's how we think about the vaults. The vaults being kind of Friktion's native investment products, they can all come together regardless of like what the type of user is, because we think that's the largest output from product market fit.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and sort of on that note, like what's Friktion's vision for DeFi? Where do you guys see options? Where do options features and like structured products sit in that vision as well?
And I'll tack on to that. What do you reckon is the catalyst to unlocking like widespread adoption of DeFi derivatives?
Man, good question. So I think what our vision of DeFi is at first we need to build all the primitives that exist for normal users and make them as capitally efficient as possible from an infrastructure perspective. And then we need to make these consumer friendly. I think that's where Friktion really fits in. And this is also how we think we can get to the billion DeFi users that we're aiming for. Really it's plugging into places where there's already million to 10 million like monthly active users on fintech consumer applications. That's kind of how we view the product in the long term. its success and its new user base will come from people who haven't used DeFi before. Actually, I think Solana is a good testament to that, right? Like a lot of people on Solana have not even played around with ETH DeFi before coming here, and as it builds its own brand as like not an EVM compatible chain, it'll also I think bring in a community of people who are looking for better UX and are just not comfortable with kind of some of the risks of being on other chains or just learning other chains and dealing with that stuff. So short answer is a really kick-ass UX and also just friends who want to teach them about this stuff. I think that's something that Solana has done a really good job of, and like how our team got together too, right? It's like we find new things and we tell each other about it, and then we like dabble in it and see if it goes well. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I think it's all like I guess building on that, like I think I've really touched on, or yeah, what kind of matters. But I think, like basically, like as crypto's maturing, right, and people are going to give. I mean, yeah, like right now there's a lot of like nominally yielding kind of investor products, right? And so I guess like if you look at like our front page, it's kind of like sustainable yields, like one of the key terms we use. So I think part of it is even just like a transition, like the growth and maturity of like crypto. Like a lot of it's going to be like I think we think is kind of like a natural transition, just like helping it along and like being there as it happens, you know, because like there's already being derivatives being built, capital efficient. I mean, Zeta is a great example of like a capital efficient derivatives platform, right? So it's just like the matter of like, okay, well, okay, how do you get volume to Zeta? Okay, how do you get liquidity? And then who's there like once the market trend kind of moves towards that as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point I didn't touch on. Is like our big belief is that the future of yield is not driven by like necessarily token emissions. And as Alex said, like sustainable yield comes from the inherent risk properties of an asset, not from the number of tokens emitted in some epoch. So we really want to dive into that, and that's another good way of how we think it scales.
Where do you think most of the, I guess, like profitability is in that kind of space? Is like vol generally overpriced, do you think, in crypto, and people like seek to benefit from that?
We have, I think amongst the team, we have mixed thoughts, but Alex, go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, I think we typically try not to think about it that way. I think typically, I think the way you should think about it as a builder, if you're a trader, yeah, if we were like still trading, then I think I give you like an opinion. But I think as a builder, you kind of want to avoid that mindset because as a builder, you're never going to. It's never an intelligent decision to compete with like some specialized player, right? Like a market maker or a trading firm, a hedge fund, whatever it is, who actually has an opinion, does the research on this. Like as a builder, you really should be providing like some products that's kind of separate. It's less specialized and more consumer facing, right? In my mind. So I think we try to avoid less like discretionary opinions on the market and more about, okay, how do you think about the market at a high level? Like what can we adopt passively for any user that they can access? Basically, how can we reduce frictions between users and like passive sources of yield? And then from there, we kind of think about, okay, what are the sectors of yield, right? What are like the fundamental drivers? There's a few, right? You can think about like, okay, borrow lend markets, like one of the most fundamental. Obviously, like volatility is kind of a different one, kind of completely kind of different separate section. You can kind of create different kinds of structure, but you can even merge the two, right? Create some kind of structured note. And this gets so like we're kind of thinking more like this perpetual yields, right? Like the basis, so just kind of like tied to borrow lend markets as well. So all these things are kind of tied together, but they also have like different dimensions which kind of move their values. So I think we more think about, okay, like what are all the diverse like possibilities to gain yield at like a high like kind of more passive investment level, and then from there, like how do we just like open that up and kind of bring that into the ecosystem so anyone can access it, you know?